Hello everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE and compare it against the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE and see which specific device you should go ahead and pick up. Now, I will definitely tell you, I think getting the Galaxy S21 FE is probably the better way to go, but it's definitely not even a perfect, device. I think something like the S20 FE is still very good, but I honestly think in this day and age, you could probably buy the original versions of these phones. So you can buy the Galaxy S21 or buy the Galaxy S20, and you could probably have probably the same type of price tag going on for both those devices. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head as I'm going through this comparison. But if you want to pick up some phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, so far, there's only been, I think, 2 mainline FE phones. We've had the S21 FE and the S20 FE. I think there may have been some other FE Fan Edition Note phone from back in the day, but for the most part, these are the main S lineup builds. Now, with the S20 FE that came out back in 2020, we had a 6.5-inch Super AMOLED display on the front of this thing. And personally for me, I think this thing was a pretty decent display. It was 1080p and it was a 120Hz panel. So those types of things are very, very important because when you're getting a phone like the S20 FE, you want it to last as long as possible. You want it to be as future-proofed as possible. And with the S20 FE, in my opinion, you are pretty much getting just that. You are getting a phone that is still very relevant, that still has lots of features built in, and it's still a pretty decent display. It's not a perfect display by any means, but I think it gets the job done. And I, for one, I look at that type of panel, and I still think it looks pretty good. Fingerprint sensor in the display as well. With the S21 FE, on the other hand, it's still a very good display. I don't want to give the impression that it's not. I don't even know why I said on the other hand. It's a 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display. So it's 0.1 inches smaller than what we're getting on the S20 FE. Not a big of a deal. It's still perfectly fine. I'm totally cool with it. It's 1080p, 120Hz on that panel as well. So again, I am a fan of the S21 FE. I think it definitely looks like an overall better phone than the S20 FE just in general, but I like how both phones look. The S21 FE is clearly the better one, and it has a better display. I'll definitely say it has the better display on that phone. Now on the bottom, both these phones have USB-C ports, but the S20 FE has a really nice feature. This phone does have a microSD card slot. The S21 FE does not have that type of capability. So that's kind of an unfortunate realization, I would say, with the S21 FE, where you don't have that type of capability. The S20 FE has it. So if you were somebody who wanted to go and have the ability of expanding your storage out and still having a phone that's still kind of modern, the S20 FE is really the only option you have. There may be some other phone manufacturers making phones with microSD card slots, but this is the one phone that kind of has it now that's still kind of relevant. The S21 FE doesn't have it, so keep that in mind. Not the biggest deal in the world, but still something to kind of remember. Now on the back, both of these phones have plastic backs. So, remember, if you remember, Samsung did bring in that plastic back on that S21. I don't know why they did that. That was so weird. But they did end up bringing it back to the frosted glass backs. Both of these phones do have this frosted plastic back type of architecture. I think they called it Glastic, which is very corny. But I will tell you, it still works. It's still fine. The good thing about a plastic back, though, is if you drop this thing, it's not going to break it or it's not going to crack on the back. You can still break the phone, but it's probably not going to crack the plastic on the back. And there's probably ways to fix it fairly cheaply. You can probably melt the plastic and kind of move on from there. You have the triple camera setup on the back, wireless charging, reverse wireless charging on both these phones as well. And overall, it's a very good built phone, both of these. They're definitely not the most premium things in the world. They definitely are built mostly out of plastic, but there's also a lot of metal and aluminum on these phones, and they still feel like a fairly flagship phone, if I'm being honest. So when it comes down to that, this definitely gets a thumbs up for me for sure. Now, moving on to basically the camera side of things, both of these phones, like I mentioned before, have a triple camera setup on the back, and they are almost identically the same type of cameras. I actually think that Samsung just took the same camera from the S20 FE and just placed it on the S21 FE. So in the back of the S20 FE, we had a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, where the S21 FE we had a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Literally the same exact camera resolutions we can film in 4K at 60, and literally the same exact megapixel count for not only the back camera but the front camera as well. 32 megapixels there too, and 4K at 60 on the front. So I say that to say I think Samsung just did a drag and drop, literally the same exact cameras, And if you even kind of look at the lenses, like they kind of do look kind of the same if I'm being honest. Of course, there's different designs, but I think this is totally fine. I think both these phones have very good cameras. Of course, things like TikTok and like Snapchat and Instagram, those types of applications, as I mentioned for a few years now, they're not the best on either one of these phones. Samsung has tried to make some improvements though, which is good, but I would say for the most part, you are probably getting the same exact camera between these two. So whether you get the S20 FE or the S21 FE, pretty much the same thing, and there's not really too much to kind of worry about there either. So in terms of that kind of covers it up on the camera side of things. Now from the software side of things, we are getting a little bit of a different experience here too. So this is a big thing to keep in mind. With the S20 FE, that phone came out in 2020, and it started off with Android 10. You can get Android 13 on it, and it doesn't really look like that thing is going to be getting many more versions of software from now. With the S21 FE, this thing came out in 2022. So it came out almost a year after the S21 came out. But the thing is that phone started off with Android 12. Right now it's on Android 13. It's probably going to get Android 14, and then it's probably done. Which is kind of weird because it had kind of a short lifespan. It probably got the same number of years. Actually, I didn't even get the same number of years as the S20 FE. So I feel like Samsung could, push the S21 FE to be up until Android 14. I think that's something that should be very, very important. I guess, again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But if I were Samsung, that's probably what I would recommend doing. Now, performance-wise, these phones are kind of different. With the S20 FE, we have the Snapdragon 865 chipset inside with 6 gigs of RAM on the base model, but it does go up to 8 gigabytes of RAM. Where the S21 FE has that Snapdragon 888 chipset inside with 6 gigs of RAM on the base model, and it does go up to 8 gigabytes of RAM. So that right there, I would say you're getting very similar styling of RAM, but you are getting that 888 chipset, which I think is definitely a huge improvement from the 865. Now with the 865 on the S20 FE, you're still getting the ability of doing lots of cool things. You can still play heavy intensive games, play low intensive games, pretty big applications, emulators, video editors. You could really do whatever you want to on the S20 FE. It's definitely going to start showing its age though. It's definitely not the fastest phone as it used to be, and definitely with One UI updates, it's probably slowed a few things down here and there, but I think Samsung did a good job with that phone, and that chipset was honestly pretty decent. But with the 888 chipset, this is a much more modern one, and I think this was the go-to one even when the 8 Plus Gen 1 came out, or when the 8 Gen 1 came out, because that one had a few issues. At least with this one, with the 888 on the S21 FE, it was still a very good experience. So I would say the S20 FE is still good, but the S21 FE is still a much better chipset in my opinion, and that would be the one I'd probably recommend buying because that one is a little bit more optimized in pretty much every single way. So to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'll tell you is between both phones, I think the S21 FE is the better one to go. I think that one has more features, has more capability, and that would definitely be the one I would recommend buying over the S21 FE. But the thing that I would tell you is that I wouldn't even recommend buying either one of these devices. I think you should just probably buy the standard models of these two phones. So I think the S21, the standard Galaxy S21, is probably the better way to go over the standard Galaxy S20. And that probably makes the most amount of sense. You could probably even buy a Galaxy S22 as of right now for probably the same price as an S21 in the used market somehow. So if you can make that work, you might as well swing for the fences and go for that if I'm being honest. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.